Greetings to our subscribers from more than 130 countries and 6 continents worldwide. We are 9.09er. I am Coach Ervin, and with me is Coach Brian. For the longest time, we have featured videos on IELTS and OET. But because PTE is now gaining popularity among candidates going to USA, UK, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand, we have decided to come up with more videos related to PTE. So without further ado, I'll ask Sir Brian, tell us more about PTE or Pearson Test of English in general.
The Pearson Test of English Academic is an examination that is supposed to not involve any human intervention. It is a computer-administered or computer-delivered examination, and it's also computer-assessed. All of the test items are machine-scored, which means to say you're going to get a fair result when you take this exam. Also, that guarantees that you get your test results in the shortest possible time.
In fact, there was a time during COVID when very few people took examinations. They were able to get their PTE results within a few hours, like in just a matter of 4 hours or 5 hours. They were able to get their score, knowing that taking examinations wasn't really a priority during that time of the pandemic. So PTE is actually known as the Fast and Fair English exam. Fast because in other examinations, you have to wait for 5 days, 2 weeks, or sometimes even 3 weeks for the results to be out. But like what Sir Brian mentioned earlier, it's possible for you to get your PTE results in less than 24 hours. But why fair? In other English exams, there's a human interviewer. But for PTE, you are evaluated by artificial intelligence. No wonder why it's called the Fast and Fair English examination. In other English exams as well, there's a paper-delivered version, but for a paper-based version. But for PTE, it's purely computer-delivered. So here are interesting tidbits if you are still undecided which examination is ideal for you. Well, in our previous videos, we already came up with a content on how to ace PTE writing and PTE speaking. But the focus of this video in particular is PTE listening. That's why let's ask Sir Brian, the head of our online review department, who got the perfect 90 over 90 in all PTE components. First, what's the format of PTE listening?
Well, the PTE listening examination actually is the most complicated examination in PTE. It is composed of so many different question types, and it's just like any other English examination in the sense that you have to listen to recordings and answer questions based off the recordings that you have listened to. But it's quite complicated in the sense that there's so many question types, and unlike other English tests in which you get only maybe 3 or 4 question types, in the listening examination of PTE you get everything. So for example, you start with summarized spoken text, and you have maybe 1 or 2 items for that, and then you end with right from dictation, and everything else in between will be taken in PTE. So you have to be very prepared when you take the examination, because most of the time the experience of candidates is they panic since they don't know the question type, or they're not familiar with it, or they don't know what strategy they're going to employ, or they're still probably adjusting to the question. That's why they're lagging behind, and this is usually the cause of failure in the PTE listening test.
Okay, let's talk about accent, because for IELTS, or the International English Language Testing System, it features accents from various parts of the globe. When OET was first introduced to the market, primarily it made use or featured Australian accent. But what about for PTE, Sir Brian? Do we expect more of Australian accent, more of the British accent?
Actually, it's representative of all accents, even non-native accents. So you might actually get to hear sometimes Indian accents or Chinese accents being represented in the PTE. But in my experience taking the examination, I've heard the American accent more than any other accent, although the British accent is there, and probably the Australian accent was there as well. The American accent is quite prominent in the PTE.
Okay, let's talk about the perfect score or the number of points. In IELTS, it's 9.0. You get the perfect 9 in IELTS listening if you get 39 or 40 correct answers out of 40 points. And then in OET, the perfect grade is A. And is that 500?
Yeah, that's
More or
correct.
less, okay.
500, 450
Mhm.
to 500.
But what about for PTE listening, Sir Brian?
It's 90 over 90. And quite interestingly,
Mhm.
even if I really want to share with you what the number of points should be, it's variable per candidate and per exam. So sometimes you get more items, sometimes you have fewer items depending on your performance because the computer throws onto you various questions and a number of different questions based on your performance. I have actually had some students who finished the examination
Mhm.
much sooner than expected, and I have some students who actually spent more than 2 hours working on the test. So it really depends on your performance. If you're really good, in my experience, there's a tendency for you to finish the examination ahead of time, and so you will be receiving fewer items compared to other candidates.
Great. Now we know that 90 over 90 is the perfect score in PTE. What about the passing score, Sir Brian?
Well, there is no passing score in the
Mhm.
PTE, just like in IELTS or OET. There's no stamp on your test result form that indicates that you've passed the exam or you didn't do well in the test. You will have to compare the results of your communicative components,
Mhm.
that's listening, reading, writing, and speaking, plus your overall score with the requirements of of your university or your agency or embassy or employer or whatnot, because they are the ones to set the standards on what score you're supposed to get for the PTE. Some might actually require higher scores. For example, for Australian immigration, it will be very high as 79 or 80,
Mhm.
or even higher sometimes. And some might actually require a bit a lower score perhaps. For example, in some student visas, you just need 50 or 55. So it is really greatly dependent on the institution that you're applying to.
The way I see it, 79 or 80 is the equivalent of 8 in IELTS, right?
That is correct.
Okay. So 55, that's around 5.5 in IELTS.
And that's around, yeah, that much.
That
or
much.
Yeah, about 6 maybe, or 5.5. Yes, that's correct.
Okay, in our previous videos, we've mentioned that for IELTS listening, there's true, false, not given, or matching headings. Rather, these are questions that come out in IELTS reading. But for IELTS listening, there's gap fill, multiple choice, or short answer questions. What about in PTE listening? What are the types of questions that our candidates are likely to encounter in the actual examination?
Super interesting question because they're basically the same.
Uh-huh.
So you get the same types of questions like multiple choice, you get them, you have fill in the blanks as well. But there are some types of questions in listening that you will never encounter in IELTS. For example, one is write from dictation, in which there will be a sentence that will be stated in the recording. You will have to listen to that and write everything that you hear from the recording. And for each word that you write, you get 1 point for that. There's also highlight incorrect words, in which there's a transcript of the recording, and you will have to spot which one is incorrect based on the recording that you have heard. Or when we talk about fill in the blanks in IELTS, it requires a lot of comprehension because you will have to write the answers to the questions, and sometimes what the speakers will be saying is different from what is written in the questionnaire. In PTE, you have the entire transcript, and there are just going to be blanks, and you just have to supply the words that are missing based on the recording that you have heard. There will be no paraphrasing whatsoever in the test. So it's actually not easier. There are more types of questions, but there are very striking similarities between the IELTS and the PTE. So it's rather familiar for a lot of people who are taking the test.
Listening to Sir Brian right here, now I understand why he said that PTE listening is one of the more complicated subtests. Because I'm quite familiar with the IELTS format, the OET format, and upon hearing Sir Brian mention the different types of questions in PTE listening, PTE is not necessarily more difficult or easier than other examinations, but for the types of questions, there's just so many in PTE listening.
Super.
But why are you watching this video? You want to know the tips and tricks on how to get not just the passing score, but perhaps the highest possible grade in PTE listening. So let's ask Sir Brian, how did you get the perfect 90 over 90 in PTE listening?
Well, the simplest answer to that question is I prepared for the test by means of studying how you're scored in the test. How am I going to be graded in the test? And I found out that there are certain questions that hold more value compared to other questions. And you want to prioritize those questions because some might not be contributing so much to the total percentage of scores that you're going to get in the PTE, while others will take a huge chunk from your test score. So my primary suggestions would be to focus on the questions that are valuable, that are going to give you a greater number of points in the test. And to give you a few examples, fill in the blanks or fill in the gaps will actually give you a lot of points in the same fashion as write from dictation. The most important part of your examination will not only impact your listening score greatly, but also your writing grade. So if you can't write from dictation, you can't take down everything that you have heard from one long sentence, about 10 to 15 words long, then you don't want to take your PTE yet, because you'll be spending so much money and wasting so much money, because you will have to reset your examination if that's the case. So make sure that before you take the examination, you can do fill in the blanks and write from dictation perfectly well, and that's going to ensure that you're going to get a good score when you take the test.
Apparently, this video is just an overview. In our live classes, the lecturer usually allots 2 hours for listening, 2 hours for reading, 2 hours for writing, 2 hours for speaking. Not to mention that our reviewees get to enjoy one-on-one coaching every single day from Monday to Sunday. So it all starts with the core subject, followed by the exercise and the daily one-on-one coaching. And dare to compare, 9.09er is the only Philippine-based review center that offers daily one-on-one coaching for these high-stakes English examinations like IELTS, OET, PTE, TOEFL, and SHOPEE. So watch out for our videos focusing on PTE reading or OET listening. In our future videos, we're going to focus on these. But for now, please don't forget to click the subscribe button. And if you think that the video is helpful, go ahead and share to your friends so we can also help them to pass the examination, even with just free videos. But for now, we'd like to thank you for your time, and we'll see you in our next video. Bye!